Now, there's no serious conversation about markets, inflation, and economies that would have taken place this year without mention of the phrase global supply chain disruptions. Now, overnight, we all became au fait with what this meant and talked like we were experts. Well, today, we have a real expert in the house. Please help me welcome Geoffrey White, CEO Agility Africa, to Captains of Industry. Our laser gaze on the men and women driving industry in the Middle East and Africa regions. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. Now, Geoffrey, thank you for coming through and chatting to us. Am I correct? This is your home. This is your office. This is your field when we talk supply chain, logistics, and disruptions.
So if you look at what Agility does, Agility is a Kuwaiti-owned company. We're listed on the Kuwait and the Dubai Stock Exchange, $7.5 billion company. And we focus on supply chain disruption and solutions for the supply chain, as well as building infrastructure to support the supply chain. So from an African perspective, our strategy is very clear. We're funding, developing, and operating a network of warehouse parks to an international standard across the continent. And that is of appeal to multinationals coming into the continent and to SMEs that are a huge part of the economic growth story across the continent.
So you are the right person then to give us an idea of where we stand in this whole issue around supply chain disruptions that we first saw coming to the fore after the outbreak of COVID-19. Where are we? Are we beginning to see relaxation and normalization of this field of yours?
So I think that normalization is still some way off. Supply chains are still disrupted globally. And as a result of that, if you look at our core business of building warehouse parks, part of the attraction of those is manufacturing becoming more localized, the growth of e-commerce on the back of the pandemic shutdowns. And what we've seen is huge growth of B2B and B2C e-commerce across Africa. We've seen multinationals that used to manufacture in far off Asia and supply into Africa, rethinking that process and saying, actually, we'll start manufacturing locally and look for ways to enter the African market and batch produce to meet local demand. So I think the whole logistics supply chain has actually changed potentially significantly for a very long time.
Is that change for the better? Because some people within that conversation are also talking about a disruption of traditional supply chains and the building of new, some of which have geopolitical as well as geographical consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, it's very clear. Africa is a huge market potential. It's very underserviced. Currently, moving goods around Africa is extortionate compared to other locations in the world. So there is lots to put right and correct on the African continent. And that plays into the Continental Free Trade Agreement, the idea of one market of 1.3 billion people. And I think that with the demographics, the urbanization, the growth across the African continent, that is a hugely attractive market to be investing in currently.
Yeah, I'm going to come back and talk to you about that because I can see the excitement in you when you are mentioning how this thing is going to transform our African economies, and I see it's right on your doorstep. I wanted to take a step back though, because I think, as I was saying at the beginning, some of us speak about this like now we know what this is about. Give us a quick overview, if you like, of what exactly it is that you build when you are building these chains that are now being disrupted.
Okay, so I mean, from our perspective, as I say, our core business is developing warehouse parks to an international standard in the main cities in Africa. We started in Ghana, that's open and operating and attracted a huge number of customers. We then did Cote d'Ivoire, we then did Mozambique and Maputo. We're just starting construction in Nigeria. We're looking to add Kenya, Cairo, Egypt, Morocco, Luanda, Kinshasa, to create this Pan-African network of warehouse parks. Warehouse parks in their own don't solve everything, but what they do is they create an environment that enables business and hence creates jobs and drives prosperity. So in our warehouse parks, we buy a big piece of land. We start developing in phases, depending on what we think the market demand is. But our concept is always to match supply and demand and have a warehouse available for lease as a customer comes in. For foreign direct investment, for multinationals coming to Africa, that's a really quick solution. So rather than a 3-year process to enter an African market, they can, on a very capex light perspective, they can come in, lease one of our warehouses with no real capital requirement whatsoever, set up, start operating. They don't have to construct. They don't have land tenure to go through and issues, because we've already handled all that. And it enables them to get to market very quickly. For SME customers, and we've got about 50-50 currently, 50% are small local companies, 50% are multinationals. For local companies, it enables them to scale, move into compliant, safe, reliable premises where they can actually focus on growing their business rather than what's been stolen or the power has gone off or the IT's collapsed.
Yeah. So if I am understanding you correctly, you're talking about a network of warehouses that you build in the different countries. I wanted to know from an Africa-wide perspective, I don't know whether you want to divide it between North Africa, which we normally regard as a separate region, and Sub-Saharan Africa, which we regard as the other. In terms of development of those networks of warehouses that you're talking about, how far are we gone? How much is the opportunity, in other words, to get better or perhaps to get to global standards?
So, I mean, what we do is we build, and I like to use a sort of automotive, we're not building Rolls Royces, we're building Land Cruisers. So they're practical, functional warehouses that enable businesses to operate, as I said, in a safe environment where the power doesn't go off, the IT is fast, and actually just concentrate on their business rather than all the environmental issues. We're very focused on adding solar panels as they develop, on rainwater recycling, on environmental and meeting SDG and compliance. And we think that's a huge opportunity as the African market grows. Now, we're not doing this in South Africa because South Africa's actually got quite sophisticated warehousing product currently. But the rest of Africa we're focused on. North Africa is a little bit more sophisticated than Sub-Saharan Africa, but the reality is this little piece of infrastructure, the niche that we're focusing on, is desperately needed in all the countries across the continent.
Wow. So where are you focusing on at the moment? And I've seen you haven't mentioned the two big population nodes. That's your Ethiopia, of course, and then, of course, you've got Nigeria.
So Nigeria, we've bought a piece of land in Nigeria. We're due to start constructing the first warehouses beginning of next year. So that's coming along nicely. And you're right. I mean, Nigeria can probably take 5-6 of our warehouse parks without sort of meeting current demand. We're already, as I say, open in Ghana. We're open in Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire has been a huge success for us. We're now on just starting phase 4 of Cote d'Ivoire and trying to keep up with demand. Mozambique was our most recent one to open and is getting good traction. As I say, Kenya, which is the other big target. We've found a site, I think, in Kenya to progress in Kenya. Ethiopia, Addis is on our hit list, on our target list. We've been talking to various people there about finding the right site and developing. And that all goes down to the concept of creating a network of warehouse parks that, as regional trade grows in Africa, can enable people a customer to have warehouses with agility in multiple locations.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I wanted to know what drives your investment. What helps you make the decision? We are going to go to Mozambique next. We're looking at Kenya next, or is it the DRC?
So we have a sort of a checklist of political stability, ability to move in foreign investment into the country and out of the country, and repatriate profits in due course or reinvest them in an efficient way. The GDP of the country, the growth of the country, the demographics and the urbanization that's going on. So we have a fairly wide matrix about targeting which countries we want to go to. And then we get far more specific. Once we get on the ground in country, we spend literally months looking at sites, looking at potential locations. Where is the demographics changing and moving? Where does distribution hubs want to be? And it's interesting because if you look at our customer mix, 30% is traditional storage and distribution and logistics. 70% of our customer mix is actually customers that are manufacturing, packaging, processing, and using our warehouses for some sort of added value. And that all drives what is our ultimate game, which is about developing the prosperity and the jobs on the continent.
Yeah. So you are the right person to talk to when we come to that point where we need to measure whether we're beginning to see the volume of goods being traded across the African continent increasing or not increasing or stagnating. But we'll get to that because I still want you to focus on AfCFTA on its own as a separate discussion. At the moment, though, I wanted to know, when you're looking at your pipeline, when you're looking at the map of Africa, are you inundated with opportunities, or are you having to scratch a little harder to find places to go to?
So we like to buy sites on the edge of major cities that are between 300,000 and 500,000 square meters in size. So that's a big piece of land. So I put that into context, that's about 80 football pitches to sort of give you a feel for the size of that. And what that enables us to do is build an initial phase that might only use part of the site, but actually over the medium term, as you add further phases, your whole project becomes a center of commerce, a center of excellence, and somewhere where people want to be to manufacture and to run their warehouse and their distribution operations. So from our perspective, it's the challenging part isn't the market demand necessarily. It's finding the right location, negotiating with the investment and promotion agencies, etc., to acquire the land and get the licenses and everything in place, and then the construction. And I mean, it's interesting, you look from an African perspective, and Agility is the largest owner of warehouses, owner-operator of warehouses in the Middle East and Africa region. And it takes me longer in Africa to build a warehouse, and it's more expensive in Africa to build a warehouse. So one of the things we're trying to do very definitely is template our product, come up with intelligent engineering solutions to actually try and reduce the cost of developing warehousing in Africa.
Sure. So would you say over the past few years that picture has been getting better, or we are stagnating, we are not improving because our politics, I'm sorry to say, is messed up?
So I'm a great African optimist. So yeah. I think what we're doing is very basic infrastructure. So the reality is everybody I meet understands the benefits that it brings to the economy, to growing your GDP, etc., whether it be politicians or other businesses. It's very vanilla what we're doing, but it's good. It's a win-win for everybody. We're bringing the private investment. We're not asking the governments to write guarantees or put in money into the project. We fund it from the private sector. It attracts foreign direct investment. It enables the SME companies to grow and develop. And that's really a win-win for everybody. But going through COVID, it was fairly stagnant, and it was difficult to make progress on new business. I think in COVID, you could continue with business you had, but to initiate new business, specifically in Africa, where it's good to meet people face-to-face, was quite challenging. And I think, obviously, the situation in Ukraine doesn't help. But overall, the trends are growing demand for what we're doing from e-commerce, from local manufacturing, and we're very confident that the market is going to grow. I think the obvious next huge step forward is the opening of the Continental Free Trade Agreement and getting that operational. We were very proud. The very first AfCFTA transaction that was done across the continent was actually moving batteries out of Kenya into Ghana, and they delivered them to our warehouse park in Ghana, which was a great moment for us.
Wow, well done, well done. Okay, I see you itching to get to this Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but I was going to suggest before we go to that question that I think you should build something that we can call, I'll send you my invoice, we can call it the Agility Africa Trade Index, because you measure the movement of these goods, you see these goods flow, and you facilitated the very first one. Thank you very much for that idea. But let's talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So, one of the questions that I always ask everyone I talk to when we're talking about Africa matters, especially as far as intra-African trade is concerned, is whether we are beginning to see the fruits of that landmark agreement that we saw stitched together by our African politicians in the form of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How many products are you beginning to see moving under the auspices of that agreement?
So as I say, I mean, it's very early days.
Okay.
The concept was launched just before COVID has struck.
Yeah.
So I think it's understandable it hasn't made a massive amount of progress. And also, I think people have to manage expectations in relation to the Continental Free Trade Agreement. I mean, every country, bar one, has signed the agreement and agreed to move into it. There's a ratification process. Yes. There's the implementation process. There is the goods of origin paperwork that needs to be done. And my interactions with them is there is very strong progress being made on all those fronts to actually get it operational and working. I think the initiatives from AfCFTA in relation to payment platforms and to supporting cross-border trade are fundamental to making the AfCFTA work, unlike necessarily previous trade blocks that haven't been overly successful. So we're very confident that in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a growing number of goods that can move across the continent. And that is fundamental to enabling local businesses to grow and expand. If you're a producer, a manufacturer in Ghana currently, the border issues are sufficiently difficult that your market is really constrained to a domestic, say, 35 million people in Ghana. As soon as you can supply into the whole of West Africa, your market as a local producer becomes a 500 million person market. So the potential growth in regional trade is absolutely phenomenal. But you have to get on top of the regulation across border. You have to get the free trade operational. I think you have to bring big efficiencies into the logistics supply chain through not necessarily infrastructure. Infrastructure is needed, but there's an awful lot that can be done in the way of digitization, pre-clearance, and online services that allow the flow of goods and technology to be much, much quicker.
Yeah. In other words, you're saying to me in a nice way, Godfrey, the numbers aren't quite there yet, but the potential is there. I take it and I'll hang on to that. But from the small sample,
Godfrey, I think what's interesting is we've seen for years customers coming to meet with us and say, we want to set up a distribution hub in Africa. And they, whether it be in Ghana or in Nairobi or whatever, and they look, they kick the tires, they talk to us, and then the conclusion at the end of that process is actually we'll just stay in Rotterdam or Bristol or wherever they're shipping from currently because it's just too difficult to move goods. I think once the flow of goods across the continent opens up, there will be a huge impetus of foreign direct investment coming in to actually build, manufacture, and operate on the continent.
Yeah, and in the meantime, you're getting prepared. But from the small sample that you have seen as Agility, Geoffrey, I just wanted to know the sort of goods that are moving at the moment.
So, I mean, relatively little. As I say, one of the first transactions was batteries coming from Kenya across to Ghana. We've got a latent network of customers who are saying, as and when we see that we're able to move goods across the continent, we want space in Agility warehouses and to enter the market. But until those flow of goods work, they're still inhibited from actually setting up operations.
Yeah. I want to change tack and talk a little bit about the Middle East, Dubai in particular, because it certainly has positioned itself as the gateway to trade globally, but also into the continent. What are the current trends that you are seeing taking into account the two shocks that we have had, obviously COVID-19, plus, of course, the Ukraine-Russia war?
So Dubai has come out of that process remarkably robustly. They seem to just continue to grow and expand. As a gateway for Africa, Dubai, a lot's down to the fact that Emirates has got the best connectivity into Africa. But the reality is Dubai is a good hub for doing business. It's got great connectivity across the continent. And more and more companies are seeing it as the gateway for accessing Africa.
Sure. We're certainly hoping that that will improve, and we continue going to see that improvement taking place. Let's bring down the conversation to agility and 2023 immediately. In terms of your plans, I was hoping that you would tell me that you have got a big pile of money that you are ready to come and expand onto the continent.
So that the plan is to continue investing. And we're investing in two aspects. One is in new projects, so expanding the geographical spread of our network parks, and then investing also in expanding what we've already got. So somewhere like Cote d'Ivoire, as I say, we're pushing on with the fourth phase of expansion in Cote d'Ivoire, the first three all being not just full, but oversubscribed. Likewise, in each of the projects we've got. Nigeria, I think the market potential, it's taken a while for us to get the title deeds clear in Nigeria. That's now completed. So we're looking forward to starting construction in Nigeria next year. And actually, I think Nigeria is going to be a huge market for decent quality warehousing.
Yeah, just some of the inefficiencies that you were talking about that need to improve. And by the way, if you need any stories anecdotal about the inefficiencies of the border posts, I can write I don't know how many books telling that part of the story. But I wanted to talk a little bit about you. How did you get into this field? Because I'm thinking to manage a logistics business, you would have had to study what?
So I was studied economics at university with management science, and then I joined a big industrial group called BTR at the time as a graduate trainee. Came out top of their graduate trainee program, and then did various jobs within BTR at Dunlop, at electrical wholesale companies, etc. And then moved from that into retail and became a buyer, the youngest ever buyer at Asda, which then got bought by Walmart and became part of Walmart, the global retail chain for foodstuffs. And then started getting involved in Africa when I started working after Asda, I started working for a Middle Eastern family in their private office. And they were investing in Africa. And I suppose I got sold on the continent and never looked back. And from there, I went to being the CEO of Lonrho PLC. We took Lonrho back to the main market in London. And then when Lonrho was bought by some Swiss fund managers, the chairman of Agility asked me if I'd like to come and devise an African strategy for him. Yeah. And together we came up with the idea of building this network of warehouse parks, which is going from strength to strength.
Yeah, so I think it would be fair to say you have been a friend of the continent for a very long time, or as you were telling me, 25 years to be exact. But I'm interested in your story with Lonrho. Many of our viewers, of course, these days would not recognize anything from the word Lonrho, but Lonrho actually comes from London Rhodesia Company. Which company, of course, which name came from the former name of Zimbabwe, a long-time colony of the British. We can go back and go. But what was your experience at Lonrho like?
So Lonrho, I thought, was fascinating. There's still a huge amount of goodwill on the continent in relation to the Lonrho brand name. And when we took it over, Lonrho was started in 1961. And then became a big conglomerate and then got split up and broken off into mining and other parts. So during my 8 years in tenure, we started rebuilding the Lonrho brand and re-executing on businesses. And I think what was interesting was we were a big agricultural producer and distributor supplying into Walmart, into Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, etc. from an African produce perspective. We planted huge peach plantations, blueberry plantations, etc. But the beauty of Lonrho was, and it's not necessarily an attractive term nowadays, but it was a proper conglomerate. So we also had a hotel division that built new hotels across the continent. We had an airline that was trying to open up the regional airline market. We had a shipping business, so we had an oil and gas services business, so we had a proper range of businesses. And I think if I look back on my career, the variety of things that I've interacted with stand me in good stead, because it means you've got a really wide knowledge base and experience, a huge set of customers from all different aspects of the market, rather than being very specifically focused on being just one product sector or one industry. I think it's really helpful, the fact that you've got a breadth of understanding of a wide range of customers. And that helps us today. I meet customers all day long at Agility, and I immediately have some synergy with them because I know about their business.
Yeah, the economist who eschewed the markets. I'm just remembering here, of course, Lonrho was established by one tiny Roland, and that guy, of course, had a checkered history across the African continent. But you also reminded me as well, we didn't talk about the other side of the business, which is the oil and gas sector that is booming across Africa, a sector that is attracting the attention of Europe. How exciting is that space? Very, very quickly.
So I think very quickly, I think it's a huge growth driver for countries. I mean, we invested specifically in Mozambique, which is quite a small economy, but we invested there because there's going to be somewhere between 20 and $40 billion of foreign direct investment going in to build the LNG trains that will take Mozambique from being a small economy to a very wealthy economy. And the things like that, where you can project what's going to happen in the future and what's going to happen to economy, are some of the triggers that make us want to go in and create that infrastructure. And indeed, we've already got oil and gas companies as tenants in Maputo.
Absolutely. I remember talking to a friend of mine who is in Maputo, and I was asking him, can I come and buy a flat here or something, you know, that will sort of rise in value over the years as the continent develops, and of course Mozambique booms. And he said, Godfrey, you're late. And that was 5 years ago. Geoffrey, thank you. I hope you bought your flat. Geoffrey White, he is CEO of Agility Africa. He was our captain of our industry today. Fascinating story, no question about that. This is a company, as you said, that is absolutely growing across the continent, logistics and related infrastructure for oil and gas. And we're talking about a company in over 65 countries across the world. We're done for today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to engage you next time. For now, goodbye.